The run game is already an important part of the Commanders' offensive attack, but without wide receiver Noah Brown this weekend, it's going to be even bigger if Washington wants to get a big win against the New Orleans Saints. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can also find me helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team this season, and I am here with you every Monday through Friday. I thank you for coming through for today's episode. To all the everydayers out there who come through every day, a special thank you to you as well. If you're new to the episode, new to the show, I hope you appreciate what you see. I hope you like what you see, and I hope you come back again. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. If you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, where we're going to talk about Brian Robinson Jr. being the ultimate X factor this weekend and how the Washington Commanders will cover the spread against the New Orleans Saints. Early offensive effort going to be incredibly important, and continuous pressure against the New Orleans Saints inexperienced quarterback starting this weekend. But we're going to start off the conversation talking about why the ground attack is going to be critical in a win against the New Orleans Saints for the Washington Commanders this weekend. And we're going to do that thanks to FanDuel. New customers at FanDuel, you place a $5 bet, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. We talk about the three must-dos that the Washington Commanders have to do every week when we do our crossover Thursday episodes. This week, Ross Jackson and Locked On Saints came through, and we talked about the Washington Commanders versus New Orleans Saints matchup. Talked about the three things the Washington Commanders have to do. Number one is establish the run. Number two is score early and often. Number three is continuously pressure the New Orleans Saints starting quarterback, no matter who that is going to be. On today's episode, the final pregame episode, where we really dive deep into this matchup, we're going to break down those three must-dos, why they're so critically important. And we're going to start, obviously, with establishing the run game. And look, we all know from watching the Washington Commanders this season, the power run game with Brian Robinson Jr. and the Washington Commanders offense has been absolutely critical for this team to have any type of sustained success. When Brian Robinson is not active, or when Brian Robinson is stifled by the opposing defense, this offense just does not get humming to the rate that it needs to really put up an effective amount of points. Now, the good news is this power run game under Brian Robinson Jr. has really been able to get going quite often this season, which is why the Washington Commanders currently rank fourth in points scored per game offensively. But without Noah Brown on the field this weekend, potentially for the rest of the year with that kidney injury that he suffered against the Dallas Cowboys, Brian Robinson Jr. and the Washington Commanders establishing that ground attack is going to be even more important than usual, because this Saints defense now has one less weapon to worry about. And look, we're going to do another episode this weekend talking about the options for what the Washington Commanders can try to do to absorb the loss of Noah Brown and how to best do that. But the bottom line is the New Orleans Saints now have one fewer playmaker on the field. And however they replace him, whether it's Diami, Olamide, or any of the other options that we're going to talk about, the Saints are probably going to come out and make the Commanders prove to them that that person or that is strategy or that attack is actually worth dedicating their defensive resources to, and not rolling some extra resources over to wide receiver Terry McLaurin into the box to stop Brian Robinson Jr. So that's going to be an important part of this, but getting B-Rob going early is going to be incredibly important. And I don't just mean handing him the ball. They got to get him rolling. In the 5 games that Brian Robinson Jr. has averaged 4 yards or more, and remember, he's missed multiple games this year. In those 5 games where B-Rob has averaged 4 yards or more per carry, the Commanders are undefeated. When he averages less than 4 yards per carry, they're 2-3. So it's a very stark difference in how successful this team is, and this offense is, more specifically, when Brian Robinson Jr. is getting the ball moving at a good clip. Outside of health and blowouts, there's no reason that Brian Robinson shouldn't have at least 18 carries in this game this weekend. But it's not just B-Rob, right? We've talked about this before at points during the season, especially when Brian Robinson wasn't available for games. But Chris Rodriguez Jr. also brings a power presence to this Washington Commanders offense. And he's only gotten 4 more carries 10 times in his career, right? Not just this season, but overall in his career. He's in his second season so far in the NFL. In those games where he's gotten 4 or more carries, he's averaged at least 4 yards per carry in 9 of those. Only once has he gotten that many touches and not produce very, very good offense for the Washington Commanders. So I think when you talk about how the Washington Commanders replace Noah Brown and how they get this run game going, it's understanding it's not just getting the run game going, but then also leaning on the run game maybe a little bit more as they try to figure out who's going to replace Noah as far as the receiving game is concerned, and having Chris Rodriguez Jr. available, having him, have some of the proven success that he's had really allows the Washington Commanders, if they choose to use it, to deliver a lot of heavy body blows to this New Orleans Saints defense. I would like to see Brian Robinson Jr., Chris Rodriguez Jr. combined for 26 carries in this game. And obviously you have Jeremy McNichols in there, and he's the guy that can take advantage. You get that defense worn down and tired, and then you bring Jeremy McNichols in, and he's the guy that can really gash them for big gains as well. So there's a good backfield here for the Washington Commanders to use. There's a good history of run game offense in the front line, the offensive line blocking ability there to really do that. And with the return of Andrew Wiley expected this weekend, I think that there's no reason not to really ride that run game, not just Brian Robinson, but also Chris Rodriguez, and then, of course, Jeremy McNichols in there as it allows. And on the other side, the run game is really going to dictate the pace of this game, I think, because for the New Orleans Saints, with Derek Carr injured especially, but also without guys like Chris Olave, no Taysom Hill, they're really going to have to lean on guys like Alvin Kamara. And so the Washington Commanders defense stepping up in their run defense is going to be incredibly important. And right now this season, the Commanders not doing too great at that. They're ranked 27th in the league, which is sixth most in yards per carry, giving up 4.77, also allowing the sixth most yards per game, rushing in 137 yards per game. So Alvin Kamara certainly is a part of this. And when you look at the New Orleans Saints' success offensively and for their team in their 5 wins are 5 of their 8 best rushing outputs of the season so far. 214 yards in a win against Cleveland Browns, 190 against the Cowboys, 180 against Carolina Panthers, 96 against the Falcons, 92 against the Giants. So 90 or more rush yards for this team, and they're typically in position to win those games. Even the losses they have 197 rush yards in a 1-point loss to the Carolina Panthers, 143 rush yards in a 7-point loss to the Los Angeles Rams. So still very much in those games, even though they end up coming away with losses. Against the Denver Broncos, that's the anomaly, 23-point loss to the Broncos, even though they had 97 rush yards as a team. That's kind of the anomaly. That was a Spencer Rattler game, not a Derek Carr game, not a Jake Haener game. Now, Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener, expected to be Jake Haener, but one of those two quarterbacks is going to play this game for the New Orleans Saints as well. So the Washington Commanders really want to turn this into one of those anomaly games, but you would rather just keep the Saints from having that 90-yard rushing output just in general, keep that rushing output low, contain guys like Alvin Kamara, and come away with a victory against the New Orleans Saints. So that's must-do number 1, control the ground game, not just on offense, establish it, use it, ride it, get Chris Rodriguez Jr. involved along with Brian Robinson, set up a tired defense for Jeremy McNichols to kind of go in there and knock it down. But also on the flip side, defensively, control the ground game from the New Orleans Saints, keep Alvin Kamara from really taking over this contest. If they do those, that's priority number 1. That alone is going to set this Washington Commanders team up for a win. But the 2 other things they need to do, score early. We're going to talk about why the Washington Commanders don't do well when they don't score early. It's kind of a no-duh thing, but it's also very poignant with this team this year. And then also keeping the pressure on that young quarterback, whether it be Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can make your holidays bigger and brighter. The best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sport events, not just the NFL. They've got all kinds of sporting events to choose from on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Virginia, and Florida. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You don't have to win every single one of your lines on your tickets in order to get a win overall. In fact, you can double your money even if all your picks don't hit. And Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this season. So join now, because the holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million during Picksmas. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download that Prize Picks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. If there's one thing I've learned about the Washington Commanders, about just the sports media landscape in general, is we are all a bunch of foodies. And I think football fans, a lot of us are foodies as well. With Omaha Steaks, you get guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now, you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with the promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites from legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners, you get an extra $30 off with the promo code NFL. That's $50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchases apply. We've already talked about one must-do for the Washington Commanders: establish the ground game, contain the Saints ground game. Now we've got 2 more must-dos to talk about on this episode of Locked On Commanders. And if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is sign up to be a Locked On Commanders insider today. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And from there, you can text me your thoughts, your questions. I'm going to text you all kinds of fun stuff as well, including invitations to our insider-only exclusive Zoom conferences where we get together as a group. You get to throw your ideas at me. We get to converse about the Washington Commanders. It's a lot of fun. So head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. If you like it, stick around. If you don't, hey, I still appreciate you giving it a chance. Our second must-do that we outlined on our Crossover Thursday episode of Ross Jackson. If you haven't seen the Crossover Thursday episode, that's the episode that dropped previous to this one. Highly recommend it. Ross Jackson, easily one of the best hosts, if not the best host on this network, dropping all kinds of Saints knowledge that you need to know if you're going to be the most intelligent Commanders fan heading into this weekend's matchup against the Saints. But number 1 was establish the run game offensively, contain the run game defensively. Number 2 is going to be to score early. When you look at this 3-game losing streak that the Washington Commanders just came out of by beating the Tennessee Titans, you lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers by who scored only once in the first 5 possessions. You lose to the Philadelphia Eagles, who scored only once in the first 6 possessions. You lose to the Dallas Cowboys, who scored only once in the first 7 possessions. So we literally have games here where the defense is keeping opponents scoreless, or at least relatively scoreless, through 5, 6, and 7 possessions. But because the Washington Commanders offense wasn't able to take advantage of those opportunities, put points up, apply pressure to those opposing offenses to go through and have to put points up to keep pace, the Washington Commanders end up letting those opponents stay in the game, end up letting those opponents eventually come back and get those wins. And of course, Pittsburgh Steelers are a good team. They're leading the AFC North Division, arguably one of the best divisions in the NFL today. The Philadelphia Eagles, clearly a good team, leading the NFC East Division right now. But the Dallas Cowboys, that's the one that really hurt because, again, I mean, they only scored once in their first 7 possessions, yet they end up coming away with the victory. And that's Dallas Cowboys team that when you look at them on paper, when you look at them statistically, when you look at them on film, they don't hold a candle to what the Washington Commanders are this year. So to lose that game certainly hurt. But overall, this offense is still the 4th highest offense in the NFL. So how do you have the 4th highest NFL scoring offense, but you have those types of games? Well, because you've scored less than 20 points just twice this season and over 25 points 8 times this season. That is quite the impressive spread between those things. But when you get bogged down and you're too late to adjust your game plan against what opposing defenses are doing, those are the types of things that cost you dearly in these games. Look at that Dallas Cowboys game. Towards the end of the game, we see Cliff Kingsbury kind of switch gears, change it up a little bit, open up some different things for Jaden Daniels, that offense, and it becomes effective. But it was too little, too late. And then obviously the late defensive collapse and special teams collapse didn't help matters either. Now, the Washington Commanders this year have 22 touchdowns scored in the first half of games this season, 15 on the ground, 7 passing. They've got 18 touchdowns in the second half this season, 8 on the ground, 10 passing. So you see there very clearly this team is at its best. We go back to our first must do when it's establishing that grounded game first, then establish the passing game. So you're scoring more heavily on the ground in the first half, scoring more through the air in the second half. Pretty much all just kind of lines up. Now, they failed to score a touchdown in the first half of 3 games. The Dallas Cowboys, Chicago Bears, New York Giants. They're 2-1 in those games. But let's remember the context. Chicago Bears game is a Hail Mary, which we all know 98% of the time, if you're looking for a Hail Mary to win a game, you're going to lose that game. That Giants game was a field goal game. It was the game where they made the record-setting amount of field goals, and it's great. But really, if you face pretty much any other offensive team outside of the New York Giants, maybe the New England Patriots this year, you're probably going to lose that game, right? So yes, the record is 2-1, but when you put the contextual factors behind it, you realize how bad of a situation that puts you in as a team overall. Now, they've scored 2 or more first half touchdowns in these games: Bengals, Titans, Steelers, Browns, Cardinals, Giants, Panthers. This is the second time against the Panthers. They're 6-1 in those games. And if we go back to that Steelers game, you got some drops in there. You got a couple of missed passes by Jaden Daniels. And then, of course, you have the egregiously blown coverage by Benjamin St. Juste. You can certainly make the contextual argument that they should have won that game. So when you add the contextual factors into this thing, you can make the argument that the Washington Commanders, in the 3 games that they failed to score a touchdown in the first half, probably should have lost all 3, or at best are 1-2. In the games where they scored 2 or more first half touchdowns. And remember, usually in the first half, you're talking like 6, sometimes 7 possessions. So 2 out of 6, 2 out of 7, you're not talking about like a 75% touchdown production rate. You're really not talking about that heavy a production rate. But in those games, you're probably looking at about a 7-0 record for the most part, outside of some anomalies. So it just kind of really goes to show you how important. We all know it's important to put up those points early, but I think I wanted to really kind of get in here and diagram and really illustrate why it's so important and how it's so impactful for the Washington Commanders specifically this season. Something else that can also be impactful, our third must-do: harass the quarterback. Again, that starting quarterback is expected to be Jake Haener. We started hearing those rumors as early as Monday afternoon, Monday evening, but it really got solidified. Saints reporters started actually reporting it on social media on Thursday night. So Jake Haener expected to be that starter. However, there are some murmurs out there that Spencer Rattler could have maybe a package or maybe a scenario here and there that he might come in. Or if Jake Haener struggles early, they may have a little bit of a quick hook and put Spencer Rattler in there. But what do we know about Jake Haener? Not a lot. He hasn't even had 50 dropbacks yet this season as the Saints quarterback. He's at 29 pass attempts, completed 48.3% of those, 177 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He's been sacked 3 times. And according to Pro Football Focus, he has no turnover-worthy plays as a passer yet this season. He's also rushed the ball 10 times for 15 yards. So Jake Haener, not known for his mobility as much as Spencer Rattler is, but certainly can move around a little bit. Ross Jackson touched on that in our crossover episode as well. And with less than 50 dropbacks, yeah, you look at the 48.3% completion rate and you say, okay, this dude's not completing anything. But with less than 50 dropbacks, it's really hard to say that this guy's in a rhythm or doing anything like that. So it's really hard to kind of make that conclusion. But Jake Haener is certainly more experienced than Spencer Rattler. And I think that's the reason they're kind of going that direction. The Commanders have only lost once in games where the defense gets to the opposing quarterback 3 times or more. So pressuring Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler, whoever it is going to be incredibly important, but not just pressuring, but also getting those sacks. Pressure is cumulative. And if you see a team get 3 sacks in a single game, typically you're getting at least 12 or so pressures, maybe 8 quarterback hits, 4 pressures, 3 sacks, like a stat line somewhere around there. So the Washington Commanders can have that kind of an impact against Jake Haener, against Spencer Rattler, whoever it is. And this defense can be advantageous or take advantage of opportunities. Mikey Sanders still, Marshawn Lattimore hopefully is going to be out there. Then potentially you can see this Washington Commanders defense come away with a couple of takeaways, really shift the tide of this game. So that's our third and final must do: harass that quarterback. We want to see at least 12 combined pressures, hits, and sacks in this game. If you do that, and if you score early enough, two touchdowns in the first half, that's what we're looking for. And if you can establish that run game with Brian Robinson, even get Chris Rodriguez Jr. involved, I don't see how the Washington Commanders don't come out with their 9th win of the season against New Orleans Saints this weekend. In fact, I'm predicting a Washington Commanders win. What are our insiders predicting, and who are our X factors for this weekend's game? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to take on the NFL action this weekend with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers to FanDuel, you bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. So while you're watching the games at home, if you get a hunch in the middle of the game that a player is going to break out or score a touchdown, or a team is going to turn the tide of a game or continue the tide of a game, you can go to FanDuel. You can place that live bet, but you can also get your live stats. You can get your live play-by-play. So much more information on the exact same site where you can then place that bet. The Washington Commanders are currently 7.5 points to beat the New Orleans Saints this weekend. So if you want to take that action, you can do that, or whatever it is you want to do. Go to FanDuel.com, sign up today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, our final pregame episode, looking ahead to the Washington Commanders versus New Orleans Saints, kicking off Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. local time in Louisiana. I got to keep saying that because I have to remember it or I'm going to forget, and that's going to ruin my day. Time for X Factors, times for game predictions. My non-quarterback X Factor, we've kind of already talked about it. If he's going to be the number one must do for the Washington Commanders, he's got to be the non-quarterback X Factor. He is Brian Robinson Jr. Only one game this year with 2 rushing touchdowns. To me, that's incredibly surprising. So I expect him to have 2 or more in this game alone against the New Orleans Saints. So Brian Robinson Jr., obviously, as important as it's going to be for the Commanders to establish that power run game early, to really open up things for Jaden Daniels in the passing game, really punish that Saints defense. He is going to be my non-quarterback X Factor. For our insiders, running back Chris Rodriguez Jr., I love seeing him get some love from the fan base. He was listed among the non-quarterback X Factors. We also had some love given to Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin as well for playing that second, third level on those perimeter runs against Alvin Kamara, Bobby Wagner for making sure everybody's lined up appropriately and trying to take advantage of that opposing offense while facing a quarterback that they don't have a lot of tape on. Was also brought up. Got some love for Carl Davis, who may not even play. Practice squad defensive lineman, got called up against the Tennessee Titans. Maybe he gets called up again. If he does, there are insiders who expect him to have a big role in stopping that rushing attack from the New Orleans Saints as well. But overwhelmingly, Marshawn Lattimore getting the love as the non-quarterback X Factor from our insiders. Luke McCaffrey also got some love as well in there. De'Ami Brown, potentially expected to step up in place of Noah Brown, was also in there. Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott. There's a lot of insiders who want to see Ben Sinnott get in the action as well. There's a couple people who said whoever wide receiver number 2 is, I don't even care who it's going to be, but whoever that guy is going to be our guy. So a lot of potential X factors out there. But again, Marshawn Lattimore getting the most votes, not surprising at all. As far as insider predictions for this game, the Washington Commanders are predicted to win according to our insiders. In fact, unanimously, insiders predicted Commanders win. The average comes out to 33-15. Washington Commanders doubling up the New Orleans Saints. One insider went the Oprah route and said Jaden Daniels is going to be like Oprah out there saying, you get a TD, you get a TD, you get a TD. Look, I'm in my fantasy football playoffs. I got Jaden Daniels as my quarterback. So I'd love to see that, but maybe give Brian Robinson a couple of passing touchdowns. Let me double dip on those touchdowns. That'd be great. Biggest spread, Commanders 52, Saints 17. That was our biggest spread from an insider prediction. So a lot of confidence stemming from the Washington Commanders fan base here. You'll love to see it. My predictions this year, I'm 8-5 on the year, 8-5 against the spread. I'm on the exact same path the Washington Commanders are. Commanders, again, favored by 7.5 points at the time of this recording. The over-under on total points scored sits at 43.5. I'm not quite as bold as Washington Commanders fans are, but I do have a 10-point margin of victory. Washington Commanders cover that 7.5 point spread, win 31-21. And of course, that means we've got 52 total points scored. So I'm taking the over on the total points scored for the game. So those are our predictions. We're going to wrap up this week here at Locked On Commanders as we look ahead to this New Orleans Saints game, but it's actually not going to wrap up our week of content. Logan Paulson, hopefully you love him. I love him. He's coming through for a bonus episode dropping tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, you got questions or comments, all you got to do is send me a text message. To do that, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. Join the ever-growing population of insiders. New insiders this week. Greatly appreciate you for signing up. Hopefully you're enjoying the experience. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL in the morning. The madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off with NFL Espresso in the afternoon. Tony Wiggins brings you some real NFL talk with the barbershop vibe. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Everydayers, thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. And until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.